Welcome to the Hard Faith Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Folmar. I'm a filmmaker and producer and the founder of Hard Faith. At Hard Faith, we believe life is hard and God is good.
And today we have a very special guest, Sean Malone, filmmaker extraordinaire and short film filmmaker winner at this year's edition of the Hard Faith Film Festival in Hollywood, California. Sean, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, and this is exciting. I've been really looking forward to it.
Sean, your black and white, almost somewhat experimental film, Grand Canyon, won second place at the Hard Faith Film Festival this year.
I know, and I was floored, man. And I wore black and white in honor of my black and white film. I was so moved to be nominated for awards and then to win best short film second place. It meant so much to me. The whole festival meant a lot to me, which I'm sure we'll get into. But I felt the love of the room for sure.
I'm so glad to hear that. Sean, tell us, how did you find out about Hard Faith Fest?
You know, I thought you might ask me that, and I don't remember. All I remember, it was probably on Film Freeway.
Yeah.
But all I remember was when I saw it, I was like, this is my festival. Like, these are my people, because my film has a faith component for sure. It's faith filled, right? But it deals with some dark, the moment you hit record, that's when I lose all my words, Spencer.
You got that, Sean.
It deals with some heavy themes for sure, and it's really like a prayer. The movie's like a prayer. It's a cry out to God, like the Psalms. The Psalms of lament. And I was looking for a place, a festival or festivals where that kind of film would be noticed or appreciated, and it was a hard target to hit, because with quote unquote secular festivals, a lot of times I think the programmers or the organizers, they didn't quite maybe have an entryway or get the faith component of it. Mm-hmm. But then in Christian film festivals, I was worried that it wasn't quite cut from the evangelical filmmaking cloth that people are kind of used to. So when I saw Hard Faith Fest, I was like, man, this is it. Like they're like, they want hard faith, hard stories, but that ultimately proclaim our hope and our faith in Jesus Christ. So yeah.
I love it. And I love Grand Canyon. Tell the audience a little bit about Grand Canyon, what the production process was like, the inspiration behind it.
Yeah, well, during the pandemic, and how many times are we going to say that for the rest of our lives, right?
I know.
During COVID,
my day.
Oh man, when COVID hit, that's the phrase you hear all the time. But during COVID, I was, like a lot of people, very isolated. But I was trying to reach out to friends and people from my past, people I went to college with, just kind of trying to connect with people. And one of the guys I connected with was now a preacher, a minister in the East Coast. And he was going through some things at his church that was very common at that time for people in ministry, people in pastoral roles, going through this thing of like people fighting over masks, people fighting over lockdown mandates, a lot of, whether or not to meet despite the government guidelines to, stay at home and those types of things. And so unfortunately at the time it was weighing so heavily on him, and it was kind of, it was a heavy weight on him. I could tell it was really getting deep into his soul, because he couldn't solve all these problems just on his own or bear the weight of that on his own. And then I was listening to the radio and reading articles about, again, people in pastoral roles feeling very beset, very put upon, very discouraged during that COVID time. And so the idea for Grand Canyon was born about a widowed minister who is trying to keep things together at his church, but feeling crushed by sort of the animosity, the backbiting of that period of time. And then having that weight in his background of having just lost his wife. And I had always wanted to, I'm kind of a performer. I like acting. And, when I was in college, I was in musicals and I was in the choir, and I did this class called opera scenes where we performed scenes from the Magic Flute and anything like that. I was just like super into. But then I got into filmmaking, and I found I also really loved photography and cinematography. And I fell in love with that aspect of filmmaking. So I went to film school and, really focused on cinematography mostly, but also studied directing. And, I made some films here and there, but over the years, I've had this itch of like, I want to act, I want to perform. And especially screen acting. I've watched great screen actors like Denzel Washington, who's, the GOAT, right? He's the best. And Tom Cruise and people who, and yeah, I mentioned them, like they're the A-list movie stars, right? But they understand screen acting. They understand it as a craft, and they understand, I call them actor filmmakers, because they understand the craft, and they understand where the camera is and what lens is on the camera and how to play to that particular moment and angle and scene. And they're brilliant at that. And I wanted to try my hand at that. My meager, as I guess with my not insignificant, but also not completely robust experience doing plays and acting in college and things like that. Taking improv classes and things like that. So then I had the idea for Grand Canyon, and it seemed a perfect marriage of these ideas of like, I have something I want to say about being in a dark time, about groping for God in the darkness, about crying out to God from the valley. And I also want to act in a movie. So I'm going to make this film, and I'm going to put myself in this role. And I have a friend, Brody, who's my co-director on the movie. And I reached out to him because I said, I can't do this by myself, right? Like,
Yeah.
I need somebody, even if I'm the only actor in the movie, I got to have somebody who's with me on the directing, the cinematography, who can help me through that process. So I said to Brody, hey, will you help me write this, direct this? He said, yeah, but we'll do everything 50-50. 50-50 writing, 50-50 directing, cinematography. And we really did. So he and I struck out and created a crew of two, a casting crew of two.
That's amazing.
And yeah, he wrote the first draft of the script. I pitched him the idea for the movie, and he wrote the draft. And then I wrote subsequent draft, and, we kind of kicked it around. Maybe, I don't know, 3-4 times. And then we had a script. And then we made a plan, and we were like, we're going to go, we had these scenes that were set. It's kind of like a road trip movie in a way.
Yeah.
We had these scenes that were set on the road, in the desert, in Vegas, with the city lights, and then, of course, at the Grand Canyon. And yeah, we went out, cast and crew of two, and still during a pretty locked down period of the COVID pandemic, and made a movie. And it was exciting. It was thrilling.
That's awesome. I love that. I remember when this film was submitted, and it was one of our, our submission period it typically opens as soon as the festival ends, and it runs for about 10 months, maybe 9.5 months. And this was submitted earlier to mid-season, and I saw it, and I remember I watched it with my wife. I'm one of, multiple judges, so I'm not the only judge, but as soon as I saw it, I was just like, this is really striking. Like, I love the black and white color. I love, like, the pacing. I can't believe you did it with a crew of two. I love that so much. And the pandemic was one of the worst seasons of my life. I lost a lot, suffered a lot, witnessed firsthand a lot of those battles in churches. And I haven't seen any art about the pandemic that is honoring that time period, or just like the reflections or the isolation well. And it's such a good piece. Even like I'm not quite ready to talk about the pandemic, but it's such a good piece on the pandemic. So it gives me hope for art in the future, especially from a faithful perspective, to talk about that time well. And I feel like Grand Canyon really did.
Well, thank you. And I'm so glad you answered that question that I didn't even have to ask, which is, how did the film hit you? And that means a great deal to me. When you introduced my film, or me at the festival, you said it's a very beautiful film. And just few words about it meant a lot to me, and told me that you saw something in the movie that was, that touched your soul. And I agree. Of course, a lot of filmmaking is commercial, right? So I kind of wonder how much we'll see in the coming years of pieces that take the pandemic, sort of the pain and the trauma, the loss, of the pandemic seriously, and in a way that explores, for lack of a better word, the human condition, right?
Yeah.
During that period of time. So that'll be interesting to see. I mean, we may end up seeing movies about that for the coming decades here and there, like we did. The Great Depression is kind of the parallel I see of, like, obviously we didn't live through that, but and they're not, they're dissimilar in a lot of ways. But I think one way they are similar is that everybody who lived through that has a story, has a memory, has a feeling about it. And it just like the folks who lived through the Depression, you go in grandma's cupboard and you're like, Grandma, why do you have, 82 cans of green beans? Right. Or why did you save, like, why do you have 152 ball jars?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's because they lived through something, they know something that we don't know, And I feel something similar about COVID. Like, it was painful, it was hard, there was pain, but we come out of those things stronger, with more hope. Unfortunately, suffering is what builds our faith, and suffering is what builds our character.
Yeah.
And you never read about the person who built so much character by living on a marshmallow cloud and having everything they ever wanted. It's always through suffering and trial and hardship. So, and we thank God for those things, just like the psalmists did.
Mm-hmm. You're right. Tell me about your filmmaking journey. How did you come to love cinema? And also, what are your greatest influences? You're shaking your head.
I love this.
Yeah.
I love that someone asked me on a podcast and said, tell me why you like movies.
Absolutely.
I got upset. Well, without taking too long, my dad, when we were kids, he knew a guy who distributed Disney films.
Wow.
And so we grew up, and he kind of had a arrangement with the guy where the guy would let us watch these Disney films. And it was before the time of, like, the VHS releases of these things. So I grew up watching, like, all the Disney movies before they were even on VHS tape, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Dumbo, all the classic, Peter Pan, all that kind of stuff. I think that's where, I have to be honest and say, that's where my love of cinema and storytelling really began.
Yeah.
But we were a movie family, and we were a George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, loving family. And, as I got older, you get into Indiana Jones, and it's funny, when I went to film school a long time ago, I met this guy, like, on the first day, another student, and he goes, who's your favorite director? And I go, Spielberg. And he goes, oh, Spielberg. Like he was so like, oh, and I was like, I was kind of taken aback because I was like, Spielberg is a great director. Like,
Great director.
so then I said, well, who's your favorite director? Mr. Snooty Pants. And he's like, Fincher.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, okay, Fincher, great director, right?
Yeah.
But it always kind of made me laugh that he scoffed at, me loving Steven Spielberg because, man, Steven Spielberg is
amazing.
Yeah, you can't touch him. You can't touch him.
Yep.
He is, and my favorite directors of old are guys who kind of rise above the craft that are like him, like John Ford, like Stanley Kubrick, Howard Hawks, guys who had great commercial success, but who made superior, excellent American art in form of their films, So I fell in love with those kind of movies. Then I started getting into like Bogart and Cagney and all the old Warner Brothers and in Singing in the Rain and all the MGM musicals. Then I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey and like my mind exploded,
It's a wild movie.
And dude, I think the capping events, the movie that drew me into filmmaking after all of that preparatory work, if you want to call it that, was Lawrence of Arabia. Like, I mean, honestly, I'm kind of an emotional guy. I'll probably get choked up if I talk about how much that movie means to me. It's a perfect movie on every level, the craft of it.
Tell us a little bit about what your experience was like amongst other filmmakers and, presenting your film at Hard Faith Film Festival. You were there for all 3 days, right?
Yes. Yeah. I live in Orange County, and even though I'm wearing, this is not a Seattle hat, this is a Sean hat. That's right. That's for Sean. And I repped the Angels up there. I got to rep the OC up in LA.
Yep. Coming up from the promised land.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm Orange County based. So it was really cool to be able to go, just drive an hour or less and kind of have a local film festival that was so, that's obviously Hollywood, it's, has the whole Hollywood vibe. And then it was so well organized. I've given you guys so many compliments on just, a lot of film festivals you submit to, you pay fees, and it's always hard to pay fees, but you pay the fees. And, and your festival is no exception, you guys have fees.
Yep.
And but sometimes you pay the fees and you go to the festival and you're kind of under the impression, like, it kind of just took my money. And then like, they put on a screening just to go through the motions of
right.
Like, oh, we have a festival, thank you for your $50 fee or your $150 fee or whatever it was, when I came to Hard Faith Fest, it was like, I saw my fees, right? I saw my fees in, the venues that we were in the attendees and the excitement, in the organization, in the thoughtfulness, in the staff. I saw a festival that was well conceived, well thought out, well executed. And not only that, because that's hard enough to do. But then, and I mentioned this the other day when I made my video testimonial for you guys.
Thank you for that.
But yeah, of course. I said in that testimonial, I wanted to make it because my experience at Hard Faith was so exceptional. Like, the image of God is such an important concept. And without the image of God, we can't understand, without knowing and understanding that we're made in God's image, we can't know and understand the value that we have as human beings. And that's what I got when I went to Hard Faith Fest, is that I saw a place where the organizers, the attendees, the sponsors were treating people like we were made in God's image. We can sometimes put art up on a pedestal, and we can sometimes put it above God, and we can put it above love for neighbor, and that's not what I saw at Heart Faith Fest. I saw love for God and love for neighbor, the two greatest commands, on display at Heart Faith Fest. And then what followed was, yeah, we're going to celebrate artists. We're going to celebrate Christian filmmaking. We're going to celebrate the image of God in us, right? And the creativity. I think one of your sponsors was Creative Icons, right?
Yep.
Which takes this idea and says we're made in God's image and we're made to create, So the festival is all about that too. It's like, yeah, we're made to create. Let's give glory to God. But what's more important than that?
Yeah.
That our God loves us and that we're made in his image. So, yeah, can't say enough good things about Heart Faith Fest for that reason. So that's how I felt there. I felt like a VIP and someone who was, you guys really took an interest in me. You took an interest in my film. The attendees took an interest in each other's films and in each other. And it didn't feel like in a way that was like, what can I get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Hollywood, that kind of environment can be very transactional.
Yeah.
And it can be very like, what can you do for me? Oh, well, never mind. I don't care.
Right.
If you can't do this for me, I don't care about you. That's not how your festival was. That wasn't the vibe. The vibe was, we care about you as a person made in God's image. So.
So nice, Sean. So nice of you to say. I'm so glad that you had that experience at Hard Faith Fest. I mean, that's really our hope and intention behind it. And I, as a fellow filmmaker and artist, I do think, a lot of motivation behind making, doing the Hard Faith Fest is like, it can be a very isolating career, just like your lead character in Grand Canyon, the faith journey can be very isolating sometimes, especially if you're thinking deeply about your faith, if you're struggling with your faith. But the calling of an artist on top of that can be very isolating, especially if you're in in unique territory as Hard Faith is. And so and I've shared this before, and I shared at the film festival, I'm sure you heard this before, but I used to have Hard Faith as a category of other film festivals I ran. And so it was a category you could submit, but the festival wasn't just faith. It was just a festival at some theaters I used to own. And then out of the pandemic, when I lost all those theaters, I was like, I would really like to do a festival again, but I'd really like to just do a Hard Faith film festival where it's just Hard Faith. Like everyone there is for the same reason. And I think it could be a really special event because, the people who submit to Hard Faith, we're all like talking in the back of the theater about our faith, about how we love Jesus and how we love Hard Faith and movies and stuff like that, and we're like, we're talking passionately about our faith.
I love that. Yeah. And that's another thing, if I can jump in real quick, that's another thing I loved about the festival was like, you guys gave, during the award ceremony, you gave us all like, anyone who won an award got like 2 minutes to give an acceptance speech, right? And what filmmaker, actor, director, whoever has not dreamed of making their acceptance speech,
Yeah.
And, I made some thank yous. And then I was like, oh, look, I have 1:15 left. And then I probably then talked about the image of God and how God loves us. And everybody else who won an award had some kind of word of faith, a testimonial of, God's goodness, God's love. And so, yeah.
I love that timer too, because it really does catch people off guard. It catches me off guard. We have a timer for people who haven't been to Hard Faith Fest, because when I started running this, I was kind of a one-man show the first year before I had all these wonderful volunteers, and my wife, who's been event planning with me the last couple of years. But whenever I used to run this by myself, I would just have to start a fully exported movie, and I could never change it because like the film was like playing in a booth, and so I was out front and doing all the presenting and everything else. And so I would be changing the lights and doing the mics and everything. And so I had to time my presentation to a countdown timer. So if I was going to say an intro, welcome, I had to do it for 3 minutes. But if filmmakers were going to say thank you, they had to do it within 1 or 2, 3 minutes. And so I just continued to use this timer countdown. And it really works great for technical difficulties, because then the guy that's like volunteering in the booth, and it's different than the guy yesterday, he's not jumping ahead and jumping to revealing who like the grand prize winner is accidentally in the middle of the award show, with jumping ahead or skipping backwards, that kind of stuff. And so it just runs. You just hit play in the morning or hit play in the afternoon. It just runs the whole time. But then people have 3 minutes for an acceptance speech, and they have to fill that time, and I won't let them off the stage. But you get these beautiful speeches and, contemplations about God and art, and I love it.
Well, I want to put a plug in to the Television Academy or the Film Academy. Man, if you want those speeches to run on time, you should contact Spencer and McKenna.
It's just got a timer. Yep.
Yeah, they've got a system, and it works.
And it holds all of our feet to the fire. Sometimes I had to just make up stuff and take questions from the audience whenever I put in too much time for myself to talk. But it's a lot of fun. Sean, tell us a little bit about we heard a little bit about your cinematic journey, your cinematic inspirations. Can you share with our audiences about your faith journey? Has it always been mountaintops? What has your journey been like through the years? And
boy.
How does that also inform your art? And how do you view God today?
Yeah,
Questions.
Yeah, a real simple question. I grew up in church, and my parents taught me the faith, and my grandfather was a preacher, and so I have parents, grandparents who fostered the love of God in me, and obviously a community of people around me growing up. So I'm super grateful for that. I think what I've learned over the years about faith is that we have to be patient with ourselves, and we have to wait for God, as the psalmists say, because I love getting older because of this. I just sprained my knee. I don't move as quick as I used to, but aside from those types of things, my hair is gray now. But aside, yeah, it's good. It still has some salt and pepper, but aside from those kind of things, I love getting older because, especially getting older in my faith and growing in faith with our Lord, because He's so patient with us. And there's a million ways I can answer your question, but I'm going to answer it this way. When I was younger, I grew up going to public school and went to a public university, and I would look up at the stars at night, and I would feel so small, and I would feel so insignificant, and I would have so many questions. And I would think, and I would look at the stars and how there's billions of them, and they seem kind of randomly placed, and I'd kind of go, really, like, God made all this? It doesn't seem possible,
Yeah.
But really, this is an accident. This is just a cosmic accident. That doesn't seem possible. So I was very, I was a seeker, I guess, But the way one day I looked up at the stars, and God was bigger than the universe, finally, in my heart and in my mind. And whereas I would look at the stars, and I'd watch a movie like 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is like a proverbial atheistic science fiction movie, great work of art. And it would leave me feeling kind of cold and just with all these questions, and with a feeling of like existential emptiness, almost, of like, what is the purpose of what we're doing here, But like, I watched 2001: A Space Odyssey the other day. I watched it with some friends, and I didn't feel cold and empty, because again, God I know now God is bigger than the universe.
Mhm.
God is and that's what's so incredible about the Christian message, is that God, the creator who speaks things into existence, whose word, you know, whose mere word created all of this,
Mhm.
right? That God made us in his image, and with the intention of having a relationship with us.
Mm.
And that seems like it seems too good to be true,
Mhm.
I think, to a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
And it seems ridiculous,
Yep.
I think, to a lot of people.
Yep.
But that is the message of Genesis 1-2, right?
Yeah.
But that's why I love getting older, and growing in faith, is because now, like, and I wondered if I would talk about this or not. But I've dealt with depression my whole adult life, you know? And I still deal with depression.
Mhm.
But the difference now is that as my faith has grown, I don't despair
Mm.
like I used to.
Yeah.
You know? You have those lows, you have those feelings, you have those valleys. But a Christian need never despair,
Right.
because the Christian message is hope. It's hope of resurrection.
Mhm.
It's hope of, as Christ said, abundant life, eternal life, however you want to put that, right?
Yep.
And so it's been a slow burn, I guess. The quick answer, the long story short, is my faith journey has been a slow burn. And I don't know. I've had some experiences here and there where I've, in a more remarkable, otherworldly way, the presence of God has made itself known to me,
Mhm. Yep.
But those experiences have been here and there. And it's not just one, like, oh, and then I had this one time, and then, and then ever since then, I'm good,
Yeah. I wish it was that way.
I mean, again, I'm talking about the Psalms a lot because I've been reading the Psalms, but like,
Yeah.
the Psalms are just filled with valleys, filled with laments. But the structure of the Psalms, and there's only two Psalms that really don't function this way.
Mhm.
Psalm 88, and I think there's one in the 60s, maybe, that actually don't have a turn where the psalmist says, "But my soul will hope in God. I will look to the holy mountain, right? I will praise God, right, in the gates." However the psalmists put that, there's almost always a turn that says, "I will hope in God."
Yeah.
And even in the most desperate psalms, even in Psalm 88, which is the most depressing psalm, there are little glimmers of hope. There are glimmers of faith. And I don't know, Spencer, I don't know how, well, I guess I'll speak for myself. I couldn't make it without God. I heard
Mhm.
once a long time ago, some 19th century intellectual saying, like, my atheist critics say that faith in God is a crutch.
Yeah.
And his reply was something like, maybe it was Chesterton. I don't know. He was always very pithy. But his reply was, it is a crutch, and I need a crutch because my leg is broken,
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? Yeah, that's true. Sometimes faith is a crutch. But when do you use a crutch?
When you're broken.
When you're broken.
Yep. I love that.
And that's what God does for us. He's with us in those darkest times, even when we don't feel like he's with us.
Mhm.
The truth of Scripture is that he is with us. And so even when we don't feel a certain way about reality, about God, about existence, the truth is he is there. He is with us. Christ is King. and that's faith. You know, that's what we hope in. That's what we walk in. So,
Amen. I love that.
So you asked about my faith journey too. I do preach part-time. So
You sound like a preacher.
you're getting mini sermons here.
I love that.
But yeah, so
What
that's
size
been part of my journey too.
or church?
I grew up in the Churches of Christ.
Okay.
And that's where I currently go to a Church of Christ here in Orange County, and then I preach at ones here in the area, down in San Diego County and here in Orange County, Riverside County.
Cool.
It sounds like I'm all over the place, but it's really that I really am. I'm so in demand. It's more, I go about once a month to each of these places, and it means I pretty much have to write one sermon a month, which is very doable. You know, when you're doing other things too.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Bible school, seminary, self-trained. You know a lot about theology and Bible and scripture.
I did go to a Bible school for my first 2 years of college.
Yeah.
I went to a little school called Florida College in Temple Terrace, the Tampa area.
Yeah.
But my theological training since then has been self-taught. And a lot of that has been the past like 5 to 7 years, I'd say. And especially COVID, man. I've listened to so many audiobooks and YouTube videos. You know, you got to watch out, but YouTube can be a very great place to learn about theology.
It can be. Yep.
So yeah, a lot of that kind of stuff. Right now, I'm trying to complete a apologetics certificate course through Biola University.
That's cool.
So I have it in mind that I'd like to study more, you know, more formally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
You went to seminary, right?
I did go to seminary.
Where did you go, and what was your focus?
Yeah, so I had never read the Bible before, and I had some seeds planted about Christianity in college. And so before I moved to Los Angeles, I thought I'd like to read the Bible for the first time and decide if I believe in Christianity, because at that point I did not. And I was kind of exploring my faith. You know, I had read some other religious texts. I'd read the Quran, and I had read the Book of Mormon, and I, for whatever reason, I had just kind of written off Christianity because I didn't really, I just didn't see any sparks in it.
Okay.
And so but I was like, I can't completely write it off because I haven't read this book. I haven't read the Bible. So I read the Bible overseas. I converted to Christianity, first time reading it. Started in Acts because I felt like I'd heard the Jesus story enough. So I wanted to start in the early church, you know, just the books after the gospel. Didn't know what that was. Started in Acts. And then, you know, by the time I got to Galatians, I had converted to Christianity. And I was like, oh, okay, all right, well, this makes sense. And Life Eternal 180, love filmmaking, now love Jesus, and wanted to make write theologically sound screenplays to the best of my ability. And so I was like, I feel like I have no church history. I don't know what denominations mean. I don't know church history. I don't know what theological terms are. And so before I still moved back to Hollywood, I need to get a theological training, because I had started watching faith-based films and they didn't seem like they had anything to do with Christianity. They just seemed like they're their prayers to win the football game if they were a good enough person. And I was like, this has nothing to do with Christianity. So I went to seminary, Reformed Theological Seminary down in Orlando. And
Really?
yeah. And I guess
What's it called?
it's called Reformed Theological Seminary.
Was there a guy there named Lou Gallagher?
That name is familiar.
I think I know someone who might be a teacher there. But yeah, go ahead.
And they have about 6 campuses. It started in Jackson, Mississippi, and they have one in DC, New York City, Orlando, Florida, Charlotte, one in South Korea, and then an online program. But so I went to the Florida, Orlando campus, and our theological kind of giant there at the time was John Frame, and he was a pupil of Francis Schaeffer, who is like the patron saint of Covenant Theological Seminary in St. Louis. But and Schaeffer wrote so much about the arts, and Christian musings on the arts, especially from a Presbyterian perspective. And also founded the School of Brie overseas, with his wife. But John Frame was very much about theology and presuppositionalism. And for me, I needed like a faith that made sense, and so like Reformed theology and systematics always resonated with me, because I was like, and I've embraced more mystery now since my seminary days, but I loved seminary just to get at least familiar with the terminology and understanding of systematics and even just the Bible, because I'd read it once now for the first time just before I entered seminary, but I was still not familiar with it, right? And that's where hard faith began as well, because I was like, I believe there's a way, and I would have my seminary professors read my screenplays, Frame, and a lot of my seminary professors, I would have them read my screenplays. Some of them have still not been produced, but some of them are the films I've made, and I would be like, tear this apart theologically, like the words that my characters are saying, the words that they're talking about God, and then my somewhat, solutions, even if they're metaphorical or more subtle, like, please tear this apart. And is this glorifying to God? Because in the Westminster Shorter Catechism, it's like, what is man's chief end? Man's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever. And so I was like, if I'm going to make films, I would like to make films that glorify God and enjoy him forever. And so that's what I've been trying to do with Hard Faith. It is a challenge, and I'm not saying I always get it right, but I think the theological training is helpful, or at least a theological understanding, because I think it just gives you tools and a whole thought process, a whole world that you can wrestle in spaces and topics that people deal with. They just don't necessarily have the language to know what they're talking about, or knowing how the Bible addresses complex issues, even like something very complex like depression, which the Bible talks about extensively, thank goodness.
Yes.
And a lot of great theologians have. Even when you were sharing a little bit about your story, one of my favorite theologians and preachers is Charles Spurgeon. And he suffered horrifically, from depression, to the point that he was bedridden for days or weeks at a time. And yet he was one of the greatest preachers, first mega church preacher in England, and, had the largest church in England, and, would preach to thousands, they record, without any amplification, just by his voice. And yet, couldn't get out of bed some days because he was so depressed.
Oh, man.
And wrote about it extensively.
Well, I want to learn more about that. So I'll be looking into that. But it's funny you mentioned Spurgeon, because I think there's a Spurgeon quote I was thinking of when you were talking about your journey of like reading the Acts and then kind of going through the New Testament and being like Galatians, and I'm a Christian now, because there's this great quote and I think it's Charles Spurgeon, where he says, if you want to, oh boy, I'm going to butcher the quote, but it's something like, if you want the word of God to, be effective, all you have to do is let it loose. And he said, the word of God is like a lion. You just have to let it loose. And the idea there is like, I mean, how did so many people come to faith? It's like, if you can just get someone to read the Gospel of John or the Gospel of Luke.
Oh yeah.
Or the book of Acts, or Luke Acts, or whatever the combination is, for me, that's when I committed my life to Christ, is when I was like 19 years old. I was at Bible college. And even though I had grown up in the faith, it was the first time in my life where I was reading the Bible really for myself. And I was in the book of Luke, and I fell in love with Jesus. There's no other way to put it.
Yeah.
I looked at Jesus and I was like, I finally understood who he claimed to be, who he was, who he is, how much he loves us, how gentle how fierce he is, you know, um, all of those, I call them paradoxes, the paradoxes of faith that Christ is, he's a king and he's a servant. He's a lion, he's a lamb. He is the high priest and the sacrifice, he really is everything. Of course, John tells us he is the Word. He was in the beginning with God. He was God. Jesus says in John, before Abraham was, I am, right? So you can literally say Jesus is everything.
Yeah.
He's everything. And that's what I was thinking of when you talked about your journey. There was so much in your journey that I relate to. Have you ever heard of, well, of course you've heard of him, but have you ever read much about John Bunyan?
Yeah, I have. Not enough, but just, a little bit about his journey and a contemporary.
Telling me about Spurgeon reminds me of John Bunyan, because John Bunyan struggled his whole life with just terrible thoughts, blasphemous thoughts. But he, but he was such a great man of faith who, despite these sort of we might call them like mental deficiencies, right? But they're really like spiritual warfare that he was struggling with, these attacks, these spiritual attacks. And amidst all that, he could write something like The Pilgrim's Progress, from a prison cell. Mm-hmm. So, yep. So, yeah, you're right. There's so much inspiration in church history from great people of faith. And that's also what I enjoy about church history, too. I listened to your episode with Autumn.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And, that was her, Autumn and I's connection, is that we started talking about St. Patrick.
Oh, yeah.
And I love Patrick and Patrick's prayer, Christ above me, Christ beneath me, Christ to my left, Christ to my right. The most beautiful prayer, I think, outside of the Bible. So I love church history for those reasons.
Yeah, we have a lot of rich history that, unfortunately, I feel like we don't know that much about, or the common parishioner doesn't know that much about. And even though I've attended seminary, I've read a lot, there's so much I don't know about. Even St. Patrick, I don't know all that much about him. I was talking with Autumn, and there's so many beautiful stories of faith, Bunyan included. It's incredible.
I always say it's like swimming in the ocean. It's like,
yeah,
when you study church history, it is like, you've been swimming in the ocean for 5 years, but where does that get you? Maybe from Cuba to Florida. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like you haven't even really scratched the surface. Some metaphors.
Hey, you might be giving a keys.
Yeah, exactly. One thing I want to mention, because it jogged my memory, was you were talking about the theology of screenwriting. And that was something to me that was very important in Grand Canyon. I struggled through that a lot. I wanted to get the theology right, and I wanted it to, despite its themes of depression and grief, him being beleaguered, however you want to put that. I wanted the Christian hope to be central in the movie,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just related to that when you were saying you were showing your scripts to your theology professors and stuff, because I wasn't that smart. That's probably what I should have done, is like show it to some trusted, older, people in the faith. But really, for me, it was just going through the script over and over, and kind of checking my heart and checking the theology to make sure, like, I'm trying to communicate the hope of Christ in this story. And so I can't fail at that. I have to do that correctly.
Right.
So it's hard to put into words.
Do it correctly, and also honor the depression, the hopelessness, the despair, the crux of your character.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I stopped short of just now saying like I wanted to preach Christ, because that's so many faith films, so to speak. They are preachy, right?
Yep.
And that wasn't the impetus for this film. The impetus was more of like working through some spiritual feelings, um,
Mm-hmm.
but in a way that honors God, and in a way that ends where I ended up, in a way that concludes where I conclude, which is where the psalmist conclude, which is, I will hope in the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a lot. It's like some of Christ's parables didn't go all the way to like the crucifixion, I'm the way, and everything else. Sometimes his parables were the seeds, right? And hope
Yeah.
is, I think, one of the greatest seeds of all, if it can be well planted. Hope is incredibly effective.
Yeah, and not to get too existential or anything, but like, that is so much what's missing from
Oh yeah,
our culture. It's just like,
it's so true.
if we really are gonna commit and go down a road of materialist atheism,
Mm-hmm.
there's no point to anything we're doing.
Oh,
There's no free will. There's no hope.
yeah.
There's no purpose.
Yeah.
And this, the sort of idea that I soaked in our growing up in our culture, was sort of like, you can invent your own identity. You can kind of invent yourself. You decide what's purposeful. You decide what's meaningful, and you need to look inside, right? You need to live within. Welcome to the whole life. Yeah, and then you look inside and you're like, it's just us, and it's just a chasm, and it keeps going down and down and down. And where is this purpose that people keep telling me is inside me?
Yeah.
And then I've really come to appreciate like certain aspects of the theology of Martin Luther, one of which is extra nos, outside of ourselves. We don't find the beatific vision, to use another theological term, communion with God, and then an ultimate purpose. You don't find that by looking inside of us, right?
No.
We find that by looking above us. We look to Christ. We fix our eyes on Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith. And from him rightly flows our purpose, our joy, our everything. He's everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. In a film I did in 2020 on the opioid epidemic, talking a little bit about today's culture and the lack of hope. There's a quote I put at the beginning of the movie from Sophocles, and it says, he said, "Despair often breeds disease." And even like when we were talking about Bunyan, it's like, when you do have, and I think this is true, and I think you see it come out in all different types of ways and diagnoses today, but whenever people do despair and they have no hope, or they're only looking into their own void inside themselves and they have nothing to look up to or nothing to hope in, I think it breeds all types of diseases, first and foremost depression, but I think it can manifest in so many other ways. And I think the antidote, is hope. The way I think man truly wants to be better tomorrow, or today, is a real lasting hope. And that's the hope of humanity. It's hope of Christ. It's hope in resurrection.
And despair does breed disease. And that's what so many people, I think, dealt with COVID.
Oh yeah.
And the lockdowns and everything. And I dealt with that some myself. I had health issues during that time.
Mm-hmm.
I just, it is true. We need each other. We really do need each other. We're communal beings. Yeah. We can't make it. Yes, we need God. From him comes all our life and purpose, but that we need each other. The second greatest command is to love one another, to love our neighbor, and that's what Hard Faith Fest was so good at, was like just a love of a neighbor and seeing the image of God in each other. which is why I had such a great time there.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
Oh, Sean, what a great conversation. So great getting to know you more and your background and the theology behind your work. For people who want to follow along with your journey, how can they do that? What are your websites or social channels that people can follow along?
Well, if anyone out there is a master self-promoter, I definitely need like ninja lessons in self-promotion. But I have an Instagram. It's at Sean Cine, Seancine, Cine as in cinematography. I post a lot there about filmmaking and things like that, but also just, it's my personal thing and faith stuff. So anybody's welcome to find me there. I have a website, which I do need to update. It's seanpmalone.com. And there you can see my reel and some of the projects I worked on. I really did train as a cinematographer, and a lot of my work is focused on that. But with Grand Canyon, I was making a pivot, and I think the pivot is, or I was doing an experiment with Grand Canyon. I'm going to try to direct something, write something, act in something. And it was a pivot I really enjoyed. And I think going forward, of course, man, if you're out there and you like my work, like I'd love to DP your project if we, kind of are simpatico or whatever. But I think for my own personal projects, like I'm going to continue on this path of, making films that are meaningful to me and that show something about the hope of Christ, and directing and writing, those kinds of things. I did want to say something. Taking time to learn more about, to study the Bible more, and to learn more about theology and church history and those kinds of things, and to put together more of the Christian story, I guess, into my head and my heart. That has, to your point, made a great difference in my artistic perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I always knew that filmmaking, to me personally, would not mean anything without God.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely, there were times in my life when I was younger when I think I put it up on a pedestal that was higher than it should have been, maybe even higher than God, which of course was idolatry, right?
Yeah.
Taking the time to grow in faith, and even taking a break from, like, when COVID happened and several things happened in my life, like I wasn't doing a lot of creative stuff. I was just grinding. I was just trying to make money, and I was just trying to get by, And so, but I was also learning, and I was also growing, and I was also preaching, and that time spent doing, like, actually maturing as a person, and not just an artist, but as a person, has enabled me to come back to the artistic endeavor and actually know now what I want to do with it, because now I know what kind of films I want to make. Now I know, like, if I'm going to spend time on this, in some of your previous episodes, you talked with your guests about how hard it is to be an artist,
So hard.
And to be a filmmaker in particular, and the Hollywood apparatus, like, if I'm going to spend time on this, my precious life that God has given me, then these are going to be meaningful projects, and they're going to not just serve me, but with God's grace and providence, serve others. And so that was key. Just taking the time to grow in faith, grow as a person, has meant a lot to now knowing what kind of artist I want to be. Yeah.
That's a great lesson to learn. I mean, I feel like we're all called to a different type of storytelling. We all have our life experiences and the journey and the story God's weaving through our life. But I do think there's a time in your life where you come to almost a resting place, an acceptance of what God's done through your life, with your life, and who you are as a person, and the kind of stories that you most resonate towards. Even like, your story about whenever your first day in film school, and you're like, I love Spielberg. I went to film school and I had similar experiences, and everyone's like naming foreign directors, and I'm like, yeah, no, I still love Spielberg and Francis Ford Coppola, but I appreciate that there's a lot of other filmmakers I need to learn about more. But Life.
I'm unapologetically a John Ford man, a Spielberg man.
Absolutely.
And of course I love Tarkovsky, and I love, and Bergman's really good, and all those kinds of things. But it's weird. The movies we love are often not the movies we end up making.
True.
Like I might have one movie in me that's like a Spielberg movie.
Yeah. Do you like Schrader? Paul Schrader?
Oh gosh, Paul Schrader, did he do those?
So he wrote the screenplay for Taxi Driver, and he directed and wrote First Reformed. Have you seen First Reformed?
I've seen First Reformed, and dude,
Grand Canyon, especially the trailer, but also the movie, it gives me First Reformed vibes.
I really appreciated First Reformed, and
the ending is wild, and the message. I love Schrader. He was my very first Hard Faith podcast interview, but his story is amazing.
Wait. I'm on the same podcast as Paul Schrader was.
Heck yeah, you were. You are.
And you're talking to the guy who talked to Ann Coates, the editor.
Yes, it's all 1 degree of separation.
Yeah.
I was going to interview Spielberg.
Oh, please. I have a friend who actually got to interview Spielberg.
Oh my gosh.
Because he wrote a book about John Williams. And he got to interview, all these people. It was amazing. But no, I mean, we could go on. I don't know if you have a couple more minutes, but it's like First Reformed meant a lot to me because it deals with faith in a very I feel like in a very personal, real way. Like, it sort of has these, you see not only the characters, I guess, inner conflicts and complication. He's a very complicated character, but you see him sort of like he's dealing with like his denomination, and you see like the sort of like the denominational dynamics that happen oftentimes in religious communities.
Yep. Bureaucracy and the gift shop and the Easter anniversary and
and then you have this
donors.
Yeah, and then you have this clash in the movie of like the whole, I don't know, maybe more like left-wing politics with this sort of like established kind of conservative, reform denomination or whatever. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I appreciated a lot about it. Ethan Hawke is a great actor, and he's a very thoughtful, insightful person. I think he's probably a very spiritual person. But another movie I love is Silence, Martin Scorsese's Silence, which I think that's the hard faith goat for me. Did you ever see 30 Rock?
Oh, I love 30 Rock.
I love 30 Rock. So in 30 Rock, Tracy Jordan, he stars in a movie called Hard to Watch, based on the novel Stone Cold Bummer by Manipulate. And I think it's a play on the whole Precious, based out on a novel, And I always think of that when I think of any movie that's hard to watch, because Silence is so hard to watch, but it's so worth it. And like, I guess what I was trying to do with Grand Canyon is something similar that's done masterfully and nearly perfectly by Scorsese, which is, I wasn't trying to give like a simple answer. You know what I mean?
Right.
But the answer's there if someone has sort of the patience to look for it, to seek after it. I guess if they have eyes to see, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, I love in Silence. It cuts so many different ways.
It does.
Like you could show it to anybody, a person of faith, an atheist, and everybody has a take on it. It's almost like a Rorschach test for like whatever your worldview is.
What should to be fair to these stories, even like Grand Canyon, that doesn't come out explicitly and give clean answers, Christ's parables left many people confused. Like it mostly just left people confused. Faith-based films tend to do the opposite. They say the message like 3, 4, 5 times and to beat you over the head with it. And then if you don't answer it, then they run you over with the car at the end and the atheist dies and everyone cheers like in God's one.
It was because he gave that one lecture in the college lecture hall where you said God is dead, and
and everyone's like, haha. But it's like, it's like for them that have ears to hear, and I think too, if you lay the groundwork, if the intentionality is there, the understanding is there, especially from the filmmaker telling the story, the intentionality is there. I like to think like Silence does, and I think Grand Canyon does, and Schrader does, that there can be a great film should leave you with questions and wanting you to try and find the answers.
Yeah. And that's why, like, sometimes when I talk about these things, like we were just talking about Silence and Fresh Reformed, it's like great movies. I'm always trying to put my finger on it.
Oh, yeah.
Like I can't quite put it into words. Even a movie like Lawrence of Arabia, which I love so much, like, I think I can put it into words as far as that goes, but every time I see it, I see something new in it. I see something even deeper in it. And that's how, honestly, that's how my faith journey has been also, is like,
oh yeah,
I'm constantly trying to put into words to just understand these deep mysteries, and often I sound like someone who doesn't know what they're talking about as a result, because, I'm still groping, like, in a lot of ways, I'm still groping for like the meaning of cinema and the meaning, and like why these things are so powerful. So I'm just trying to figure it out.
We're sojourners. Not all who wander are lost.
We're seekers. Do you like The Who?
I do. Yeah.
I love that song.
Yep.
They call me the seeker. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I relate to that song.
All right, Sean, for our guests listening by audio, I'm going to spell out your name. It is SeanPmalone.com for your website. And then Sean Cine, CINE, is your handle for Instagram. Is there any place that people can see Grand Canyon online? Is it available yet, or is it still in its festivals?
Oh, they can go to grandcanyonfilm.com and they can learn about the film. There's also a press kit there for, anybody who wants to take a look at it. I don't have the film online to watch yet, but that's where they would learn about the film or contact me about it if they want to arrange a screening or something like that.
Cool. When will it be available online? What's your plans?
Maybe next year sometime.
Cool.
It's been a little slow going. I want to arrange a few more screenings.
Yeah.
I think there's potential with it, maybe to show it to faith communities, or do more special screenings. I've done 2 like kind of friends and family screenings, which I really enjoyed doing. And I really like that communal experience of like showing it to a group of people in a communal setting rather than just someone sitting at home watching it,
Totally.
So, but yeah, maybe next year sometime I'll put it online.
Well, let us know and we'll share it with our audience. A lot of people ask about it.
Oh, thank you. Let me just double check that website. Yeah, Grand Canyon Film. I said it correctly. That's the website.
Right. Well, Sean, thank you so much for attending Hard Faith, taking the time to be on our podcast today and making your incredible movie, Grand Canyon, and for this conversation today.
This is amazing. Thank you so much. I hope to see you guys at the next Hard Faith. I'm just trying to figure out in the future how I can be involved every single time, We
want you there every year.
And I want to make a sequel to Grand Canyon.
Good. I want that.
I want to, as I'm working on it right now, and I have a very strong concept for it, and it's set like 5 years after, and it's the character's in a much better place. I'll put it that way. I love and it's kind of like a spiritual love story.
Oh,
Yeah.
Man, make that film.
Yes.
Holiday at Hard Faith Fest 2026 in Hollywood, July 16th to 19th.
You know, I'm probably, my plan is to at least do the pitch fest.
Good.
And pitch the film at Hard Faith 2026. And if I can get my act together, maybe make a trailer too. If you guys have the best trailer category again, maybe submit in there. Yeah.
Good. Man, I'm excited. The Revenge of the Grand Canyon. 6.
Pastor Sean strikes again.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate you.
All right. Hey, God bless you, man. Appreciate you. Yeah, I love you guys.
Love you, man. Love you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
God bless.
Thanks for listening to the Hard Faith Podcast. If this conversation was helpful, we'd appreciate if you'd subscribe, leave a review, and share the show with someone who cares about faith, art, and honest storytelling. You can learn more about Hard Faith at hardfaith.org. Please subscribe and share.